My name's Lee Smout. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer of the Board of Trade. I was, for about the last 6 years, I was the President of the World Trade Center, which is part of the Board of Trade here. We've done a lot of amazing training programs, with both places, board and here. And I just want to welcome you to our first in the ESG Immersive Learning Series. I don't know if any of you have been down here yet, but you can see it's just a beautiful facility. We've moved down to the lake. We were at First Canadian Place from 1977, if you can believe it, when they first put up the BMO building, the big white building. And so it's pretty fresh for us to be down here in this amazing space. We've got beautiful offices up on the 16th. You're welcome to come and see at any time. It's a nice change. So welcome to this amazing place and to what we hope is going to be a great program. I hope you're looking forward to an action-packed course. It's during each session you're going to learn from industry experts and further your knowledge about integrating ESG principles into your organizations. And most importantly, I think, and this is the case for almost everything we do, making new connections. So make sure that you take advantage of that. The networking aspects of these things is always what we hear afterwards about as being really a special part of it. Before we get started, I think it's really important that we acknowledge that this land on which we're meeting is home to diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. They share with us a sense of responsibility for intergenerational equity, the well-being of today and tomorrow. Environmental, social, and governance issues impact organizations at all levels, and that requires us to mobilize in new ways and be creative and help remove some of the organizational silos, test individual assumptions, and ultimately enable conditions for sustainable systems transformation. Here at the board, we recognize the value of and importance of ESG. We're trying to go down this journey ourselves, as are many of our members, and we certainly see the value of ensuring that we apply the right frameworks, put things in place that allow future decisions to be made and gain internal buy-in that allow us to go down this path towards long-standing success. All of us gathered today can acknowledge that in order for business to stay relevant and competitive and ultimately grow, it's crucial for us all to ensure that ESG is a strategic priority. And those who don't these days, I think we all realize are at a risk of being left behind. So it's great that we can all be here to do this. The folks we've assembled, that the team has assembled to put this course, bring it to life over the next few weeks, they're here to make sure that you are able to be successful in that journey. And so I really want to thank our program development partners at George Brown College and the Brookfield Sustainability Institute, and our series partners CBRE, RBC, and Enbridge, and our networking WSP. All of these organizations are ones that we work with all the time on so many different amazing programs and opportunities. So it's really special for us to be able to continue to do it in this way, in more of a training program. I'd also like to acknowledge the board's principal sponsors, the University of Toronto, Scotiabank, the Globe and Mail, and SNC-Lavalin. And without these folks, we wouldn't be able to do any of the work we do here at the board. So if you don't mind joining me in just thanking everybody for And lastly from me, so we can get to this thing that you're really here for, I'd like to welcome our host today, Luigi Ferrara, to the podium. Luigi is the chair and the CEO of Brookfield Sustainability Institute. I think there's something happening on Thursday to announce some cool stuff, so I won't steal any thunder, but I'm looking forward to that. And is a champion for sustainable economic innovation in our community. So please join me in welcoming Luigi, and thank you all for being here.
Thanks, Lee, and it's such a pleasure to be with everyone here today. Thank you for coming out early in the morning to discuss this important topic of environmental and social governance. I'm also the Dean for the Center for Arts, Design and Information Technology at George Brown College, and we're privileged to be just down the street here at the Daniel City of the Arts and part of this new waterfront community at East Bayfront. That is reflective of many environmental and social governance principles in and of itself. Today, we're taking a look at systemic thinking and how ESG requires a different kind of thinking than the normal linear problem-solving thinking that's traditional in our companies. And we're aware that if we're going to make progress on environmental and social goals, that we need to bring a more holistic approach to the way we think and to use systems thinking. And we have a speaker here today that will cover off on that. It's a challenge that all of us are experiencing. We see around us the impacts of climate change, and we are trying to, and we see the impacts of inequity and social injustice. So we're trying as a country and as organizations to work to remedy those things and build a better, more prosperous future for our whole community. And I think that's why you're here, and that's what's driven you to come today. A little bit about the Brookfield Sustainability Institute. It was founded just a year ago, thanks to a donation from Jack Cockwell, who is supporting the construction of our new tall wood building, Limberlost Place, which is just down the street and is just reaching the 10th floor of its construction. It's a revolutionary new structure, never built before, with a passive design, and it's a net zero carbon building. So in recognition of that, we decided to launch the Brookfield Sustainability Institute with a really an express function of taking the next 15 years and trying to solve the climate challenges through applied solutions. There are many institutes that study, depletion of species, temperature change, the melting of glaciers, other scientific aspects of climate change. But I think we're at the moment where we need radical collaboration amongst industry, governments, and nonprofits to work towards solutions that can have meaningful impact and market transformation and change so that we can have a world that's more sustainable in the long run. And that's basically what the Brookfield Sustainability Institute is working towards. We're developing solutions using what we call Renaissance teams that combine expertise, young student talent, and mid-career professionals to work together with companies, with governments, with nonprofits to make the answers that are needed so that our world functions in a better way. At the same time, we're training a new generation of young people to think differently, to be more innovative, because they're going to have to be more innovative to address the problems that they'll face in the future. And we're also retraining companies and working with them like we are today to understand what to do differently, how to do it, and how to achieve actionable results. The other thing that we're doing is we're tracking solutions from around the world and building up a database so that when you're looking for a solution, you can easily find it. And we're in that process, we're finding out which solutions are missing and working on developing those solutions. So we look forward to working with you and partnering with you. Tomorrow is our official launch, as Lee mentioned, and it's very exciting because in the short year that we've launched, we're already working with 21 companies. We've had over 170 students come from around the world to work on our charrettes, solving problems for different companies. We've hired 50 students to work on key projects in the energy sector, in the food security, in transportation, in climate-positive neighborhood development, and in the circular economy. In fact, in a few months, we'll be launching the first circular fashion brand together with our partner, which is based on the combination of digital and sustainable thinking. And so we're concentrating on this area of smart sustainability, where you use the digital to help you achieve the sustainable, basically dematerializing to rematerialize in a better way the work that we do every day. So on that note, I think I'd like to now move to a company that is always helping people. CBRE is a company that has helped George Brown. In fact, they were involved in the preliminary planning for the Limberlost Place that is under construction, and they were able to guide us through the whole process of getting that project off the ground. With us today, we have Paul Morisuti, who's the chairman of CBRE Limited, and he previously led CBRE's valuation and advisory team in Canada. He's a wide-ranging background encompassing all facets of institutional real estate and land development. He's also a member of CBRE's Executive Management Committee and the Canadian Executive Council. Also with us is Amy Bugg, who is the Senior Director of Client Care of CBRE's Client Solutions team. Amy has extensive experience in developing and maintaining business relationships with highly complex accounts within CBRE. She has extensive experience in transaction and advisory services, specializing in transaction management services for corporate clients with multi-market portfolios. And she also has a unique perspective on the needs of corporate real estate users. So I'd like to invite them up on stage, where we're going to have a casual sort of coffee conversation about how they've been using ESG at CBRE. So, Paul, many people might think ESG is new, but really we've been working on sustainability for many, many years. What's your perspective on this? Is it a new thing, or is it something that we've renamed that's been ongoing and worked on for many decades?
I think the answer is, and I'm going to answer all of your questions from the perspective of the commercial real estate industry. And I think the answer is, at times it feels new, and at times it feels like things we've been talking about for 15 years. And definitely awareness over the last 2 years has accelerated incredibly, and I see evidence in companies across Canada that almost on a monthly basis, it's continuing to accelerate. But having said that, I'll go through a couple of maybe milestones. In 2006, I was on a panel, and I made a comment that a building that had just been completed in Toronto at the time, 280 King Street East, which was developed by SAS Software, and it was the first LEED, I think, platinum or gold building developed in Toronto. And I said, that's the most significant new development in Toronto in the last 10 years. And the reason it's the most significant is because all new office buildings going forward of any scale will be built to this standard. And I got off the stage and I was accosted by angry developers who said, why would you say that? It's irresponsible. It costs more to build. We don't even know that we can get a premium for it. That was a crazy thing to say. All of the discussion about the additional cost and will you get higher rent, all of that went away very quickly, and the industry understood that LEED simply became the de facto building code going forward. And by the way, it wasn't the real estate industry that led that charge. It was occupiers. It was the RBCs of the world who said, we're not going into a building unless it's sustainable. And developers followed behind. So in Canada, where we have a really long and admirable history of building to a LEED standard, much more so than in the US, we've understood green or sustainable buildings now for over 15 years. Discussions about premiums or discounts went away a long time ago. So there's knowledge of what a green building is, and that's been building for a long time. I think on the geopolitical side, if I can call it that, the Paris Agreement in 2015 was a significant catalyst, and I think everyone's somewhat familiar with that. But that was the first time countries from around the world actually acknowledged that we have to have a climate target. That target's going to be 1.5 degrees over pre-industrialized temperatures. And there was a commitment to move towards a net zero world by 200 countries. And that changed things, I think, quite a bit. Having said that, the Paris Agreement came out of COP21, and the 21 denotes the number of meetings that they've had. So there were 21 meetings that led up to that, and those meetings went back to the early 90s. The most recent has been in Glasgow, that was COP26. So there have been 30 years of the global of global awareness about the importance of getting our arms around the climate issue. So those things have been bubbling in the background for a long time. What I would also layer on that is the involvement, perhaps controversial, I don't know, but the involvement of Larry Fink and BlackRock. Larry Fink is the ultimate capitalist in the world, even though he's being branded at times woke or a socialist or a communist. But Larry Fink runs BlackRock Capital. They're the largest money manager in the world, I think 11 trillion in assets under management. And a few years ago, he began writing a letter to stakeholders, and he was one of the first people kind of from the Wall Street world who drew attention to the immediacy and the primacy of climate change and acting on it. And his thesis at the time, and it remains today, he said, I think the science around global warming is real. I think if we don't act soon, the results will be catastrophic. The results to the global economy will be catastrophic. So we want to understand from the companies that we invest in, what are the risks in your company as you transition to this net zero world? And if you're not planning for it, if you're not ready for it, that's a red flag. Maybe we shouldn't give you money. And he has ramped up those letters every year. And I think that helped the commercial real estate industry, which tends to be pretty slow moving and pretty conservative at the best of times. I think that helped to catalyze this idea that when people talk about sustainability, it isn't that Larry Fink woke up one morning concerned about the polar bears. It's really more about, this has to be, as you said, Luigi, a holistic approach to business, the same way that we review financial metrics for a business or a building. We need to understand the environmental metrics, the social impact, the governance issues. All of that is part of running a successful business these days. And I think you put all of that together, coupled with the fact that severe weather events are increasing almost every year, the planet continues to warm, in the summer in Phoenix it's 130 degrees. All of those things have added up to where we are now. And where we are now is there are some people in the commercial real estate industry, Amy, I think, can attest to this, who still don't know what the letters ESG stand for. And you have others that are really well down the path of their journey. So it's a long-winded way of saying, although a lot of people have begun talking about ESG lately, what's led up to that's been going on for 15, 20 years.
And, you know, obviously with the dramatic changes that have been happening in the last 3 or 4 years, it's been an acceleration of the need for this kind of response. So, you know, with a looking glass into the future, how would you see the real estate industry responding, and what will be the impact on the real estate values of ESG and trying to meet these goals and challenges over the next few years?
Sure. So that last part of that question I get about twice a day these days. You know, to put it in context, this is a stat that I think people are now familiar with. About 40% of global GHGs come from buildings. And if you factor in the amount of emissions that come from producing cement and steel, the real estate industry is responsible for a lot of GHGs. So we have to act. The other stat that I think is important to realize is that 80% of the buildings that will still be standing in 2050 have already been built. So the real estate world's response to ESG can't simply be, we'll build net zero buildings, because that won't do anything. We've got to refurbish the entire inventory. And right now we're refurbishing or decarbonizing our inventory at, people would say, maybe 1% of the inventory a year. At that trajectory, we won't hit any net zero targets until 2070, which is 20 years too late. So there's a lot that the industry has to do. What is happening within this new ESG world? I'll talk about what will happen if you don't act. If you're an owner of properties and you do nothing, your access to capital is going to go down significantly. So the investors that invest in these buildings, the pension funds that invest in them, no one will be able to attract that capital if they don't have an ESG strategy. Lenders who lend on these properties within a short period of time will likely charge a higher interest rate for a building that is not green. And in time, they might not even lend to them at all. Because banks, part of the emissions that get counted for a bank, they also cover the emissions for properties that they have a loan on. So if TD Bank has lent to the owner of this building, and the loan to value ratio is 70%, the TD Bank is responsible for 70% of the emissions from this building. So they will not lend if you've got bad credentials. Occupiers or tenants who have strong ESG credentials will not occupy a building that isn't green, so you won't be able to fill it. And ultimately, if all of that happens, you will not be able to sell the building. So this trifecta of you can't find occupiers, lending or finding debt is going to be very hard, and being able to sell it might end up being impossible. That's a trifecta for a death spiral. And where we see this being most pronounced is in the office sector today, which has other issues attached to it. So again, I think the short answer would be for a real estate owner who is not taking this seriously, who does not have robust ESG reporting, they are very quickly becoming dinosaurs. And whether the owners of those businesses believe in climate change or not is entirely irrelevant because the rest of the world has moved on. So you ignore all these things at your own peril. That would be the concluding comment I would make on that.
And how do you see it by sector? Like, you know, there are hotels, there's industrial, there's retail. How does ESG, does it all impact them equally, or is it more, will there be, more impact in different sectors?
I mean, to date, definitely, most of the conversation's been in the office world. That's where we have the longest history of LEED buildings. We don't have a lengthy history of building, LEED industrial buildings or LEED hotels. But all of that's changing very quickly as well. So to give you one example, because a company's emissions are not related solely to the emissions from that building, those would be Scope 1 emissions. Scope 2 emissions would be, where do you get your energy from? Is it brown or green? And Scope 3 are kind of supply chain emissions. And included in there would be something like business travel. So all of that stuff is getting rated. If you're a company like CBRE today, and you're going to hold a conference in a city like Toronto, and you've got 3 large hotels that can facilitate all of our people, and they're all located in the same area, and one of those hotels is net zero and the other 2 aren't, I can almost guarantee we will go to the net zero building because it aligns with what we are doing corporately. Because that is now the mindset, as an example, the Fairmont Royal York, I think as of the end of last year, just became the first carbon neutral hotel in Canada. The owners put about $38 million into the decarbonization process. So it started in the office sector. It's moved into industrial. We see large occupiers of industrial buildings today who will say, ESG is important to us, and we want to be in a building that reflects that. So if you're building us a brand new building, it better be net zero. That kind of discussion didn't happen even 2 or 3 years ago. So it's moving into every sector now, for sure.
Okay. And is there a company that's sort of been leading this, that's doing a great job at ESG in the sector?
I've been hugely impressed, and I at times I can be very critical of the industry that I work in, but I've been very impressed with the progress that's been made. If you look at the annual ESG reports that Oxford puts out, Cadillac Fairview puts out, Allied Properties, Dream, they're extremely well done. It's not all fluff, it's not all greenwashing, although there's some of that in there. So I think today, almost any pension fund in Canada is among world leaders. I'll give you another example, the TD Centre. And the first building in the TD Centre, it's hard to believe this, but the first building went up in the 1960s. But the owners of that complex, Cadillac Fairview primarily, spent $200 million recently recladding the building, swapping out all the single pane windows for double pane. They moved to a district energy system for their cooling, which freed up 20,000 square feet in the building that they could now lease. They've done a lighting retrofit, and they have taken a complex that by age is quite old and really kept it up to date and competitive. And Cadillac Fairview's been rated by, I don't remember the global agency, but #1 amongst its peers for the last 2 years in a row. So the Canadian pension funds are all over this. They're doing a job that we can all be proud of, but a lot of those private companies are as well, and public companies, for the reasons that I mentioned earlier. If they don't, they can't raise money, they can't borrow money, they can't do all of those things. So I think there's been, as I said, just over the last 24 months, I could probably point to 10 companies in the city doing really good things.
So in effect, we're leaders if you look at this.
Yeah, I mean, the UK and the EU and Australia have always been ahead of us on this sort of sustainability journey. The United States has always lagged us, and there are reasons for that. I think Canada has done a pretty good job. I'd say personally, I've been a little disappointed that Canadian governments have talked a good game about sustainability and a net zero transition, and they've done some things to move us down that path, but not enough, to be honest with you. And the reality is, not just Canada, but the entire global community, we're not even close to the targets that we need to be at. If we're going to stick to 1.5 degrees by 2050, most of the heavy lifting has to be done in this decade, and we're behind the curve almost across the board. So good things happening, but we've got to pick up the speed.
There's so much more to do.
That's right.
Yeah. On that front, there's been a lot of greenwashing. What's your take on the whole issue of greenwashing?
I mean, it's to be expected as we kind of move into this. There are companies that are more concerned with checking off boxes, and they don't have a real deep commitment to ESG principles. That strategy won't last very long. The beauty of ESG, unlike LEED, which is kind of a snapshot designation of how the building was built, ESG is really all about, here's our target, here's our time frame, here's how we're saying we're going to get there, and every single year we're going to be measured on that. So if your corporate strategy is to effectively try and bullshit people or just check off boxes, you'll be found out pretty quickly, and I just don't think that'll last. So a lot of that'll get shaken out, I think, fairly soon.
Over time.
Yeah.
Yeah, the challenge is tremendous. We just released a report with RBC and BSI yesterday about the decarbonization of the built environment sector, and you're right. We need to be, doing at least 4 to 5% of buildings a year to meet the targets, not just the 1%.
Yeah. And what I hear, in defense of developers in Canada or owners in Canada, there's so much confusion as to what will be the new regulations around this? What will the new rules of engagement be? Is the City of Toronto going to come up with a standard that we have to hit? Is the federal government going to do that? Are we going to adopt, GRESB or something? And so there's been a bit of a reluctance from some owners who don't really know what are we supposed to do and how are we exactly supposed to report, because we don't really have a good regulatory framework in place yet in Canada. But again, that's changing, and it'll continue to change every year.
Yeah. Now, Amy, I'm going to hand the next question over to you.
Sure.
To talk about, what does ESG mean to CBRE, both globally and in Canada?
All right, well, in the interest of systems thinking, I think I need to preface this answer with, it means very similar. We have alignment globally and in Canada. We don't want to be thinking in silos, and I think that's a big part of what the systems thinking topic is about. So we have set out to make some very bold commitments at CBRE. We're tracking to meet our net zero target we've set in advance of the 2050 deadline set out by the UN. So we have committed to a 2040 net zero target. Now, my first thought when I hear that and I read companies' ESG reports is, well, 2040 isn't that far away. we have a lot of work to do in between. And while I can't specifically answer questions around how we are going to directly execute on that 24 plan, we have global counterparts who Paul and I have connected with, and there's an internal team in place at CBRE that are very committed to tracking and measuring and reporting back to key stakeholders that we are committed to those goals. Another key thing that we're pretty proud of at CBRE is we really wanted to take a look at where we're spending with our suppliers. So we have increased our diverse spending. We had a commitment in 2021 to spend $1 billion with diverse suppliers. And at the end of that target date, we did exceed it by 20%. So it's something that we've been able to measure and track. And over the next 5 years, we are committed to spending $3 billion with diverse suppliers. So again, that seems a little easier than the net zero one. That's a bigger fish to fry. But, and I know Paul touched a lot on the E portion, which is the tendency in commercial real estate. But I think one of the things, again, with systems thinking that we don't want to forget about is how important the S is. And especially at CBRE, we like to think of our people as our internal stakeholders, and they're demanding a lot more from CBRE. They are asking the tough questions, such as, what are we doing about corporate culture? What are we doing around diverse hiring practices? They want to see more women in senior leadership roles. So we have a lot of really, really great things that are happening kind of from a people perspective that we're proud of. And we don't have it perfect, but we're working towards it. And then specifically in Canada, again, we're making sure that our Canadian strategy is very aligned to what we've set out to do in the globe. So when I was thinking about what I might touch on from a Canadian perspective, Paul and I can't take credit for this, but certainly in our Vancouver office, we are running a pilot project with one of our regional offices. One of our senior leaders identified that we really need to dig into ESG, and we want to start somewhere. We want to start small, and we want to do it right. So we've gone out and we've hired an internal ESG consultant to work with our CBRE team in Vancouver. And really one of the things that they're doing, which is fascinating to watch, is they're working one-on-one with all of our internal people in that office specifically, and they're almost conducting individual sentiment surveys with employees. So, if your manager asks you, how do you feel about working at CBRE? Your answer might not be as honest as if a third-party person was asking you. So they're really having a lot of these critical conversations, and a lot has come out of that. There's, big reports that have been published about all the feedback gathered, and the culture is really shifting in that office because the leaders are really leaning in, and we're seeing change in that office. And the intention is to take what we've done in Canada and roll that across the country. We just don't want to start all at once in case we don't do it right.
Yeah, it's interesting because, working on ESG means actually that continuous process of thinking about things, of trying to not just do the routine, but trying to innovate and do something better every time. So, what are the challenges that you face internally when you're trying to implement the systems thinking?
How much time do we have? So I would say that the biggest challenges that we have from a CBRE perspective, and I think it's probably not exclusive to CBRE and a lot of people can relate to this in the room, is I think it's geographical boundaries, and I also think it's the sheer size of our organization. We are a company with over 115,000 employees. We have over 500 offices. To expect that everybody's going to be aligned in the exact same way is just not realistic. So we really have to kind of dig in and make sure that we're not thinking in silos. But I do think that our barriers are also our benefits because, as Paul mentioned, there are other partners that are a lot further ahead in their journey. So we rely heavily upon our partners in places like the UK and other parts of the world. I can't count how many times I pick up and call our UK office for research and lessons learned. And I think that's a really good partnership to have. And I do think that we're in a unique time where this isn't sort of a competitive process, it's a collaborative one. We need to work together to achieve this. So we found that our partners are really proud to share what they're doing, and they're willing to help and holds us more accountable in Canada as well.
So you're actively sharing best practices
Absolutely.
by encouraging the conversations.
Yes, and I would say at this point we're getting more out of it in Canada than they are, but the hope is we can take those lessons learned.
One day we'll be able to...
We'll pay it forward, yeah.
Yeah, that's terrific. And what are you doing as an organization to address the barriers that are out there? Paul mentioned the regulatory confusion that is sometimes a barrier. What are your barriers and how are you trying to influence and make the change possible?
So I think one of the biggest barriers in commercial real estate personally is we have to really shift our mindset from this short-term thinking approach to a longer-term approach. This isn't something that we're all going to sit in a room and solve overnight or in the next year even. And at CBRE, we are a very sales-driven organization. So our people are focused on the point of sale. They're used to having things done maybe a little bit quicker than, a 10-year, 20-year timeline. So I think that will involve a lot of education and training for our people internally to really make sure that we don't expect everybody to go out to the market and be able to speak eloquently on everything ESG, but what is required of us is we need to make sure that our people have the right research, that they have the right tools to be carrying the right message so that we're not operating in kind of that siloed thinking, and our message is consistent across the board in Canada and globally. So a big focus for us over the next coming years is education. We have some things in motion on that front, and we hope to not run into the problem, like Paul said, of what do the letters stand for, because I'm glad you said it. It was pretty alarming when we dug into ESG to find out how many people didn't know the basics, and it felt like we need to go back ground up and try to work through this process and really.
And if I can add to that, I mean, another barrier that I think is more broadly based. I saw some statistics recently that showed the average tenure of a CEO in North America is the shortest it's ever been. Their compensation is the highest it's ever been. There seems to be an incentive, obviously, for short-term performance. At the country level, if you look at politicians, I don't know any politician that isn't in permanent recampaign mode, and they sort of operate in 4-year cycles. Everything that we're talking about with ESG is kind of has a long tail on it. It's obviously very important, but we're not really structured to deal with long-term problems. Most politicians are loath to introduce anything today that will not be popular with voters right now, but it might result in long-term good. So I'm concerned about just are we properly set up corporately and politically to deal with this issue? And that's a hard question to answer, but I think given the significance and the scale of the problem and the fact that we've never really been able to address long-term solutions in a broad-based way, that concerns me when I think about our ability to deal with all this.
Yeah. Continuity, I think you're so correct to underline it, because all of these goals take a long time, and changing a system takes naturally a long time for the effects to be absorbed, and for the change to happen, and for the results to emerge. And if you're too short-term in your thinking, you'll move on to the next thing and not continue the hard work that needs to be done. And it's probably something that in North America we really need to fundamentally grapple with. Is how do we make ourselves have a longer perspective, which is precisely what sustainability is about, thinking out for 7 generations, thinking about the generations that come after us and making sure our decisions today affect them. I can't thank you both enough for the wonderful information that you shared with us and the wisdom and insight that you've brought to this. Thanks so much, and I know that people will look forward to seeing your progress at CBRE, and I know that we'll hopefully continue to work with you as you're trying to reach these goals and assist you in any way we can at the BSI and also at the Board of Trade. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Luigi. Thank you, everyone.
Luigi.
And now I just want to take a second to thank some of the people that have worked to make this day possible. At the Board of Trade, we've been working with Daniel Rufo, Laura Tucker, Carly Laxton-Oros, and Sarah Pirani, who've done an incredible job organizing this series. And I want to recognize on our own team, Jacob Kessler, who's here, and the people who are filming, Andrew Wright, Michael Nguyen, and Joanne Ajay. And as well, we have with us today Arianna Scaglioli, who's our visiting scholar from Milan, from the Politecnico in Milan, who's with us. So thank you to all who've helped organize. And now I'd like to call on our keynote speaker. Monica Contreras is the chief architect with Bell Canada, and she's a registered architect and project manager with 30 years experience developing award-winning strategic buildings of mixed-use residential commercial complexes, institutional campuses, transit-oriented new communities, and currently telecommunication facilities as well. Many people might not know this, but Monica was responsible for building the world's greenest building back in 2005 with the computer science building at York University. That remains, I think, one of the most green buildings that we have in our city. Since 1999, she's been focusing on this kind of leadership and really developing projects that are incredibly innovative. Some of our projects include the Schulich School and the Daphne Cockwell Health Sciences building at Ryerson, and many buildings at the University of Toronto as well. We've been lucky to have her as a faculty member at the Institute Without Boundaries at George Brown College, where she teaches integrated design process, which is fundamental to achieving ESG goals. And so I'd like to call on her up here to present her learning module on sustainable, sorry, I'm going to get the title right for the thing. It's sorry, I've lost the title, but it is systems thinking for ESG, if in short. Thanks.
The building was 2001, by the way, not 2005. If it had been 2005, it would have been easier. Thank you for this opportunity to present to you today. Please note that a copy of the presentation is actually in your takeaway bag. They wanted me to just remind you of that. So the presentation today, Systems Thinking Empowering ESG. We will be discussing how to utilize systems thinking strategies to help you assess and reframe environmental sustainable governance. We think systems thinking assists you in being able to evaluate the current conditions of your organization's ESG performance, to identify improvement and gaps for positive interventions. We're going to have a table workshop where we will apply mapping, or what we call systems diagramming techniques, to better understand the interconnections within your organization's complex ESG ecosystem, if you have it or if you don't. And we are going to have a team of us walking around helping you during that workshop. So as Luigi mentioned in his introduction, I have been, I was going to say struggling, but I guess maybe I should say I've been seeking the opportunities for the past 24 years, trying to realize successfully sustainable projects, which is very easy to tag, but very difficult to achieve. And obviously, because I'm an architect, that's always focused on how to build the building, how to design the building, but it's also focused on the people involved in the construction of the building, the occupants of the building, and most importantly, the value proposition, so the economic structure of each project as well. Now, one of the things that I do at Bell Canada as architect for all their buildings and structures is to be pro-innovative. So how can we integrate some of the innovations and ESG goals that Bell has overall as a corporation into our projects? And again, that's quite a challenge because we're a very large company and we have 10,000 buildings across Canada. So I was asked by the organizers of this to also talk a little bit about what motivates myself and how I motivate others in my projects. And one of the biggest words that I always think about when in any project is the word balance. And the reality is that our economic structures in our society are embedded in nature. The World Economic Forum has just recently calculated that more than half of the world's economic output is moderately or highly dependent on nature, and that's estimated about 44 trillion. Therefore, we want to seek balance between us, what we do, which is very impactful in the environment, and the natural environment. So we're going to have about 30 minutes to chat about systems thinking, and then we're going to have almost an hour to go through the workshop. So if you have any questions or anything I'm saying in the lecture, maybe we can discuss it at each table when we're going around looking at the task at hand. So for this three-part lecture series, we tried to come up with an ESG definition, so we are all aligned. When we talk about ESG, everybody understands what we're saying. We believe that systems thinking opens our thinking to have a big picture with a long term, so several generations, 7 generations in the future of what is around us. And we believe that a business organization must structure the ESG within a systemic framework to stretch beyond the immediate near timelines of a few years, usually motivated by quick profit, but stretch its relevance to generations ahead and act in a unified manner at the systemic, portfolio, and organizational level. Now, just a quick, not intended to be a promotion of Bell, but Bell, as a very long running company in Canada, it's Canada's largest communication company. We have over 40,000 employees, and it's been around for 143 years, operating in first communications and now telecommunications sector. Is a good case study, and since I know it intimately, a good way to make reference to it. We have had many accomplishments, but one of the most interesting one is if you start to look at the history of ESG concerns within the company, and it goes all the way back to the 60s and 70s, and it was in the 1980s where the Corporate Responsibility and Environment Group was actually formed, and that has been evolving until now. So the company has, from many decades, have been focused on this. Now, what is also interesting about Bell is that its ESG goals are very simple and focus on supporting our purpose, which is really to connect Canadians with each other and the world. And we do this by setting very clear and achievable targets. Customer satisfaction and network reliability is key. We focus on people and culture, as well as circular economy and all opportunities to do that, and looking at the impacts of the business model, especially its vertical integration. So why worry about systems thinking? Well, The power of systems thinking is that it's fueled by constant learning. So if you look at the ESG goals of Bell, learning is a key word that we use over and over again. Continue to learn, understand. Systems thinking allows you to understand systems, their interconnectedness, behavior, components, and identify their subsistence with all their complexity. Systems thinking also asks of you the who, the what, why, when, where, and how, what we call in design thinking the design levers, in order to arrive at uncovering the system, a system. Also, systems thinking makes you comfortable with complexity, which is very important in the topic of sustainability, since it is what we call a wicked problem. It also allows insight into understanding relationships, especially relationships between people in the workplace, and accepting contradictions and misalignments between components. System thinking and ESG then intersect. ESG is usually structured, as Luigi had mentioned, as a linear process of setting up goals, collecting the results, and then reporting. However, a systemic ESG approach would understand the evolving culture of the organization's customers, definitely involve all the employees, be pro-innovation, which is very difficult to do within the deliverable of the workplace, be flexible and strive to create long-term value to gain competitive advantage. So it's a long view, not the short view of profits. A systemic ESG exceeds the now, the current regulatory framework, and focuses on learning knowledge to make the world a better place. So you're always thinking, what if? What can we do better? How can we achieve that in the future? So once you start to think of all that surrounds you as a component of systems of varying scales, one starts to understand that all the physical and conceptual constructs by humans are systemic in nature. And that's because, as Pablo Corell will speak to you in a couple of weeks, because we are biological systems, everything we create is in fact systemic. And he will also look at systems are pervasive in all aspects of our human civilization and what the issues are around that. So if this is just a plug for his lecture 2 weeks from now. So this image best expresses systems theory. There's a lot of things that you can read on the internet about systems thinking, and one of them is that that systems actually are unknown, and in fact they're not. A system is either a physical or conceptual entity composed of interdependent, interrelated, and interacting parts, and they react to an existing environment or framework. A system is defined by its behavior and its actions and expressed in its outcomes. And it's usually found in a preferred state with its structure of all its components interconnected. Each part of the system may also be its own system. And when you look at the sculpture, you understand all the components and all the systems and subsystems and interrelated parts of this car. And if you take any one of those pieces out, the car won't work. So that is a kind of a visual guide of how systems are, and they exist in an environment, which we'll talk about next. So one of the most important considerations when looking at a systems design is to consider its largest scales to its smallest component. And this is essential in systemic ESG because if you want to vertically integrate ESG in an organization, one must understand the contributions of any individual at any level at the finest scale. And we just heard CBRE talking about that, how their ESG is coming to talk to any individual person. And our own Bell ESG, I think I was on the job 2 or 3 days, came to talk to me and say, okay, you're the architect. How are we going to be able to use your leverage to achieve our goals or the goals that we can even exceed? And that's what ESG would be in practice, right? Each contribution by each individual person is as important as the contribution by the whole. So the environment of systems can refer to many different kinds of environment concurrently. And the environment is really a collection of forces, external forces, elements, and influences that affect the system. One of the most recent theories about systems is chrono-environment, which means is that an organization or an entity or a system also reacts to the accumulation of all impacts of the environment on an organization over time. So it is not just what's happening right now, what's happening next. It's also an accumulation of what's happened in the past. And at Bell, with 143 years of history, I see that in the buildings, right? It's actually embedded in the buildings, this chrono-environment impact on the organization, which is a very interesting concept to start to unravel. Indicators exist inside systems, and it's a way to measure the system, and understanding the indicator determines how the system functions to produce results. So with like ESG goals, right, if you can collect or examine to understand the inherent performance of a system, all you have to do is look at the goals that have been achieved or not achieved, and then you can start unraveling because these indicators actually show you whether it's properly designed for that organization. For systemic ESG components of a system, they also act as pathways to achieve a goal. So for instance, one of the ESG goals at Bell is to electrify the fleet of vehicles. We have put that as a target in the future to achieve a certain percentage of electric or hybrid vehicles. Now, buying the vehicles, which is what the fleet wants to do, it's really not going to achieve the targets, obviously, because you're going to have a whole bunch of bought vehicles that can't go anywhere. So one of the analyses is what is the component that will need to facilitate the ability to install electric to run electric vehicles is to install electric charging stations. So we're right now currently doing a study on the ones that we have installed, how they're performing, and where to install more, because they also have to be in strategic locations where the fleet can come back and recharge and not add carbon footprint to unnecessary travel. So it's actually a very, very complicated process. And again, it's not a matter of just setting a goal. You need to really understand the systemic nature of that goal. So systemic ESG approach needs to be vertically integrated, as we've just discussed. And similarly, we need to understand how subsystems that are interdependent also require a horizontal integration with subsystem will lead to successful outcomes. So while you can be vertically integrated through the organization, you also need to reach out horizontally to all the various divisions in order to be able to achieve your ESG goals. So in summary, sort of how do we do an analysis, a design analysis of the system? Sorry, I think. So there are a few steps that we recommend to follow. We have to define the actions of the system or its behavior, define its environment and framework, and in that, the history of that environmental impact. Find its preferred state and pattern or its structure. You know, sometimes an org chart tells you a lot about how ESG is integrated. So if you see I see these org charts all the time. You see an org chart, and it's right at the top, somewhere below the board is the ESG manager or VP, and you see nothing below it, and you know it's not integrated. You have to also identify those components and details of each component of the system. So if the goal is about, you know, electrifying a fleet, then you have to understand how that's going to link to the people who are going to do the planning and installation of the charging stations and managing that fleet that's electrified. Identify the relationship between components, so who's going to work with each other, who's going to support and ensure the deliverable. I don't work independent with any project in Bell without many people that work in different divisions of the company, including network. I can't touch a building without network working with me so that we don't impact the network, which runs 24/7 without any interruption. You have to evaluate the subsystems, so the overall design of all the pieces of the company, the variables affecting the system, the relationship between the variables and the system and its environment. So COVID being a good example, how did COVID affect all our organizations? Some of us were prepared and some of us were not. Relationship between the variables, the system and the environment also means that you need to understand how people work together. And consider how the system's performance affects its ability to meet the goals. So if you set goals that are not simple and unattainable, and that actually are working in a long-term plan, you're never going to achieve them, because every goal that you don't achieve becomes a goal for the next year, and there's a reason why it wasn't achieved. And then gaps or opportunities for interventions. That's another thing that you want to be able to arrive at in your analysis of the system, because that will give you a potential for focusing on interventions that will make you more successful. So in terms of a system's performance, again, it reflects the functionality of an organization. If you can't achieve the goals, as I said, it becomes a burden on the next year or the next term goals. But it also it reflects the inability of the company to be able to achieve either redundancy or have the redundancy, so multiple goals that can be achieved. And what's important with ESG goals is that, at Bell, we have ESG goals for this year, next year, and so on, for a window up until 2030. If a goal is set for, as an example, for 2027, but we can actually achieve it now, the cascade effect is amazingly powerful, because it just means that we're going to be so much ahead next year by actually bringing one of those elements in. So it's very important to understand that the ability to achieve multiple goals, even if they're goal sets in the future. Resilience is the ability to shift from one set of similar value goals to others. And again, through the pandemic, and I'll speak to a couple of examples, some of those values actually changed, right? We fundamentally, as a company, changed, and many organizations have the same. Just explain it a little bit in the next slide. And then the renewal, the ability to actually find new solutions for problems across divisions. So I may be sitting down working on a project, and I come up with a solution that will affect another division, and will be able to supplement or help them achieve an ESG goal. And the good thing is that if this is systemic in nature, then we can actually be able to work together on that goal together. So ESG criteria can be set as a simple set of directives, such as the one that I have discussed. And the reason why they have to be simple is that everybody needs to get it. Everybody needs to understand it. If the goals are very complex and you can't explain them, then there's no point in having them, because most employees have to be in on the solutions. Now, one of the things that systems have as properties is that there are many different system performance types. Some, in general, Canadians expect that systems behave in a predictable and unchanged, steadily in a conservative manner. But that may not be the case. It may be the nature of the system to be readily adaptable or agile, be open or unpredictable. And I think many, many organizations are facing that from their environment. Their environment is impacting them in very adaptive, it's requiring them to be adaptive, agile, and it's very unpredictable. In addition, many complex organizations, again, thinking about Bell, is that the system's performance is a combination of these types. either in parallel or cyclical. So, for instance, we are launching the 5G technology, but it's actually very chaotic because we need to work with municipalities to allow us to run cables, right, and to cut trees. And we all know how controversial that is, but it is chaotic because we get approvals here and there, and it's all patchy, and it all has to come back to a building, and then from there to the next building, and so on. So in systemic ESG, this may be the performance, the performance that you're expecting be a combination of these performance types, and therefore you have to resolve the predictable ones and all the way to the chaotic, unpredictable types of performance. So we learned from surviving the COVID pandemic chaos that one of the best and strongest properties of systems is their flexibility. So for instance, at the Future of Work projects at Bell, that are as a consequence of, first shutting down working from home, and then to a hybrid, and now to the Future of Work, are having a huge impact on raising our ESG results. Because we're consolidating into smaller building footprints, strategically locating the workforce in nodes, especially in smaller communities, to reduce transportation and time, and engaging in sustainable projects, diverting waste from landfill, reusing all kinds of components of the building, including furniture, and repurposing vacant space. Our actual future of work is putting us beyond 2030 in some of our targets, which is the flexibility, right, of the system, that we can actually absorb that and then get ahead of ourselves, which is great. And it's all because of COVID. It's not because we sat there and said, oh, we're going to do this. We had to do it, and now it's a consequence of that impact of our environment. So again, systems thinking accepts that change drivers are good, and we want more of them. It is a scary place when you don't know what's coming, but it is actually, we need to think outside the box, as you heard from these morning speakers, to find a solution that meets a particular need in a new way. And a change driver will have a long, extended impact into a system. I always tell my team, just imagine entering a room full of teenagers, just criticizing the way you think and how you do things. And I've lived that because I survived 2 teenagers. And what they do is they activate several change drivers. And you really are never the same. Like when you walk out of that room, you're different because somebody's told you to think about things in a different way. And it's great. When I was in institutional buildings, I walked into a room and my 12-year-old said to me, why do you think in binary terms? Why are you designing female washrooms and male washrooms? And at the time, I was trying to get female washrooms into an engineering building. And she said, it should just be, non-denominational washrooms. I said, what, are you crazy? It's not going to happen. It's the building code, right? I just went to the washroom here, and that's what they have. So the change did happen. And since that day, I walked into the room, I walked out, and I created non-gender, non-denominational washrooms in universities. So systems design. So one of the interesting things is that, and I'm not sure how it happened, in 2022, our corporate responsibility reporting, which started in 1993 and became a formal ESG reporting, has now been incorporated into our annual corporate reports. So when you look at the Bell corporate reports, the first thing you start reading is the ESG accomplishments. And the great thing about these signals that come into systems is that they emerge as viable solutions. So if you're looking for signals of change, they're there. You can hear them. Get that teenager to talk to you about it. But they actually come with viable solutions. So it's actually an easier thing to be aware of. It's not something that you have to go and dig to find. And why do we need to know these signals? Well, because interventions of systems is an inevitability. It will happen. And sometimes the intervention or disruption, if it comes in the form of disruption of a system, it may destroy it. Therefore, organizations have to pay attention to the signals that propose a better value or correct a pain. And that's why ESG is that weather vane that's capturing all that for you. So once that signal becomes an expectation of the system, then it becomes a trend. One of the things I want to mention is R. Freeman's stakeholder theory, which proposes that an organization has to maintain and strengthen corporate legitimacy with its stakeholders to maintain loyalty, or what we used to call customer loyalty. The expectation of a system's performance using a systemic ESG perspective will drive the organization to deliver the goals and will then become that transparent report card back to its stakeholders within that stakeholder theory. So I think it's very important to intersect ESG to systems thinking because of that, if that's the future of our corporate reporting environment. So what are these systemic agents? Those teenagers in the room? Well, it's unexpected successes, failures, or an outside event. So COVID really gave us that. The gap of between what is and what should be. So you hear people, oh, that's not right. It should be. And then you write it down. Oh, my God, that's a trend or a signal. It's either here already or it will be. A process or a system that is broken and in need of repair. I don't know if any of you remember, but the medical system in Toronto, how you used to get records and get information, was broken. And through COVID, my father was diagnosed with cancer. And through the process of COVID, there was an implementation of websites where an individual had all the doctor's information on a single website. So the family can go in there and actually review test results and everything. It's all in one place, and it's in a website link. So amazing transformation just through COVID to be able to support as a caregiver your family member. That didn't happen before. You had to run around and get results from each doctor's office and sometimes pay for it. Also the changes in structure of an industry of markets. So I mentioned Bell a few times. I'm sure all of you have experienced that. Demographic shifts, and we are going through a huge demographic shift now with an aging population and very few young people, and the need to actually have more newcomers coming to the country. Also the change in societal perception, mood, or meaning. Things mean different. And we know that there's lots of emerging political movements in that. A different purpose. So Bell has recently rebranded itself from a telecommunications company to this connection between people and the world. And that's a huge different purpose to the company. And obviously new knowledge and technology, which always comes as a disruptor. There's never time to prepare for it. So in summary, we think that systems thinking is a good analytical method to understand the complexity of organizations from all these multiple perspectives in order to discover an organization's systemic profile. Once you have that profile, you can use systems thinking to have a systemic ESG agenda, and that systems analysis will help you identify an organization's behavior, performance, and all the components of it, and then understand what's affecting it. In addition to that, we can add the emergent stakeholder theories, that theory that organizations need to maintain legitimacy, and ESG can provide this transparent conversation. A system can be mapped into what we call a systems diagram, as I mentioned earlier. This diagram reflects usually all the components, relationship between the components, interconnected subsystems, complexities, representing its behavior, and so on. And this is sort of the inspirational diagram that we want to leave with you from a construction company, Multiplex, and the ESG systems diagram. On your table, you'll find a template, and if you're interested, work as a table on that template and have a discussion, whether you're sitting with people who are from the same company or different companies, and be able to work on a systems diagram, either for what you have right now or some theoretical company that you may want to explore. And we're suggesting either focus on real estate, retail, or manufacturing, because those are kind of interesting and easy systemic patterns that you can identify. So I'm on time. Thank you. So I'll call you to back.
Thanks, Monica. So the next part of the work, as Monica mentioned, is sort of group work at each table. We're going to be coming around and assisting you and helping you. On the table, there is a diagram that is similar to the diagram that Multiplex used. And the idea is to select a company, whether, think, is it a retail company? Is it a real estate company? Is it a manufacturing company? Decide which type of company that you want to work on, and then develop the diagram through discussion amongst yourselves for that company and fill out the diagram. And that's an exercise to get you thinking about the system as a whole and the system that would be needed. But we'll be, there's a few of us who are going from table to table. Sylvie Tessier will be there, Monica will be there, Jacob Kessler will be there, I will be there, and Sandia Casson from the BSI as well will be going around the tables, and we'll be helping you through the exercise. There'll be another half hour for you guys to network and to talk. I just wanted to make a quick summary. In going around and seeing the work at the tables, first of all, incredibly shocked. That circular diagram filled out incredibly quickly at most tables. In fact, I saw some people even creating other circles of extra action items from the goals that they set. So that was very, very exciting. And I think, from talking with people, they got a sense of the overall big picture, that the template, in a way, starts you thinking about the discussion, the conversation that you need to have, that these are kind of co-creative tools, that working on ESG is a co-creative process where you work with people across your organization to think about all the different systems and how they come together. And I think some of the feedback we also got that it was beneficial to have people from different organizations at each table, that you started to learn from people who are different. And if you translate that into your own company, that you will realize that there's voices in your company that maybe you're not necessarily thinking about, including, sometimes staff that are excluded from conversations that have really powerful and valuable things to say, like, maybe your maintenance operations or, the assistants who work for your executives, not only the voice of the executives, et cetera. So, those kind of powerful lessons, I could hear them coming through. And really what was impressive is how you were all looking at stakeholders. One table that I visited was imagining a way that their stakeholders could digitally give feedback to the governance body about things. So what if there are QR codes all around everything, and you could give immediate feedback, and then that kind of feedback could be collated and brought back to the governance body. In a way, it's a form of democratizing the government feedback, right? And then, of course, the call for diversity in the board structure that we need to start implementing, and ideas about where opportunity for transformation lie in terms of how do you partner with different organizations and partner within the organization to make something happen. Because usually you're trying to do it all with your own resources, but you could do so much more if you combined resources between different divisions in an organization. So, wanting to leave you with that thought that ESG is a conversation amongst all the stakeholders, including stakeholders that are not within your own company, in terms of the total ecosystem that you operate within, which we heard from Paul this morning is an ecosystem that's in rapid transformation, at least in the real estate sector, but I suspect in every sector, from the college sector, and let me tell you, our sector is in transformation because of what Monica, called the teenager in the room. The new ways of thinking and the new ways of living and behaving that are coming, from all the new technology and the changes that we're all experiencing. The most recent of which is the whole AI phenomenon. But there's many, many more coming. So thank you for attending today. Please take time to continue to discuss with each other and to network. And we really look forward to seeing you next week, where we are going to be examining how to work across the silos in an organization, how to use a new type of technology that we call shredding, which is sort of an integrated design workshop where you can actually solve things by compressing all the stakeholders together to work creatively to solve something and to kickstart your ESG efforts. And Sylvie Tessier, who's here, will be speaking with you next week, and I look forward to seeing you all again and to having you come back and learn more, and also to learning from you, because there's so much knowledge in the room. So it's not just us, it's all of you teaching each other. So thank you so much. Sorry, one more thing, an important thing. We have with us Matteo Colello from WSP, who is the sponsor of the networking aspect of this session. And I'm going to call Matteo up to the stage, and we're going to go to a video about WSP.
Can we address biodiversity loss and safeguard the ecosystems that help us thrive? At WSP, we know that the pathway to this future is challenging and unpredictable. We're delivering solutions that drive innovation and sustainability, powered by future-ready design. We're delivering a world of possibility.
Thanks so much for that. I'd just like to say a few words on behalf of WSP, just as the sponsor for the networking event. I just want to thank everybody for attending today. Learning about the vital importance of incorporating ESG into business activities in Canada is really the utmost importance. And as regulators and investors increasingly demand greater transparency on reporting for ESG performance, we recognize the importance of helping companies and organizations across Canada and around the world. And we understand that at WSP that the commitments that we've made on ESG are fundamental and non-negotiable. We're driven by our values of leading with integrity, empowering our diverse community, and leveraging our expertise for the benefit of all our stakeholders. Every day we are advising clients on how to reduce their carbon footprint, and reduce their environmental impact through actions such as biodiversity restoration, transitioning to renewable energy, and reducing consumption, just to name a few. So as the networking partner for the event, we hope you enjoy this opportunity to meet with your colleagues and discuss what you've taken away from today's session. Thanks.